I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Welcome to News du Jour. You may be wondering, why am I, Annie Bowles, here hosting this podcast? I usually start by telling people I'm a political baby. You see, my parents met working on Capitol Hill. By the time I was 2, I had been in my first political commercial and even got lost crawling around the West Wing. Don't worry, Al Gore found me. My family then moved abroad when I was 9, and I attended an international school in Brussels with kids from all over the world. And it is this type of global perspective that I also bring to our show. I graduated from American University in DC after studying political science and art history, as well as interning on both sides of Capitol Hill. I even interned down the hall from where my parents met. I'm now pursuing a professional certificate in journalism at NYU in conjunction with Rolling Stone magazine. I guess I was always that friend in the group who cared deeply about not just what was going on politically, but also globally. I often kept my own friends informed through high school and into young adulthood, so I guess I've always done a version of this show. I'm genuinely passionate about following the news, and I'm here to break it down for you guys every weekday. We always strive to be a calmer space to get your news. Or, as one listener put it, like getting your news from a well-informed bestie. I'm so glad you're here. Hello. It is today, March the 14th, and we still don't know where Kate Middleton actually is. I am really mind blown that with everything going on, with everything that's being said, with all the strange posts, that they have not just put her on Instagram Live for 2 minutes to chat with us and say, guys, I'm fine. I promise you, if Easter comes and she is not assuming her royal duties again, we will know something is wrong at that point. And a couple things just occurred to me. First and foremost, let's say that she doesn't come out after Easter. What happens? Do the police investigate their own royal family? And then beyond that, which, that plays into, here in the US, we're having this larger conversation about whether presidents are immune from prosecution. Is the royal family in Britain immune? And then I also thought about the fact that, with the Spanish nanny potentially saying that Kate's in a coma, if that turned out to be true, then that proves that she could not have signed off on that apology message that was put out in first person from her account, which means they are literally putting words in her mouth as she's in a coma. So if it comes out that she has been incapacitated this entire time, then I would be shocked if that doesn't break some kind of law to speak on behalf of a public persona without their consent. Guys, shit is getting messy, and I will keep you guys posted if I hear absolutely anything else, but I have no updates on that for today. That said, today is when our Senate bill here in Oklahoma is headed to the Senate floor. I will be camped out at that Capitol for as long as I am able to be today, because I'm hoping to see the vote go down first person, take some videos. Of course, I will be posting to our social. Hopefully, if I get a good recording, I will play it here for you guys. I'm very, very nervous. It's the first time that I've really been so heavily invested in a piece of legislation. So it's a nerve-wracking feeling, especially knowing that it holds people's fate in its hands. So it's a big moment. And say a little prayer if you're the praying type. We can use all the help we can get. So, anywho, we have a long episode today. We have 4 mini stories for you guys. Then we're going to touch on the House passing a law to ban TikTok. It has not passed the Senate yet, so before you go and delete your app or freak out over this, it's not a done deal. We will discuss the details. And then we're going to spend a very long time. I wrote a very long episode for you guys on the Jay Shetty of it all. If you don't know who Jay Shetty is, don't worry. We will go over it. But he is an internet sensation, let's go ahead and say, who was just recently unmasked. Unfortunately, I was a fan up until I heard all of this. So there's a lot to go over. Let's jump in. So first and foremost in our mini stories, the infamous Alaska Airlines flight was supposed to have a safety check, you guys, the exact day that the panel flew off the plane mid-flight. So scary. I really hope this whole situation makes them take these safety precautions a lot more seriously. And for our second mini story, a top Navalny aide was actually attacked in Lithuania, you guys. This guy was Navalny's chief of staff, and he was sprayed in the face with tear gas and then beaten in Lithuania as he was pulling up to his home there. Yet again, this is proving that the Kremlin has very far-reaching international arms. For our third mini story, the U.S. will be sending another $300 million in weaponry to Ukraine. That said, the Republican nominee for president, former President Donald Trump, has reportedly told Hungary's leader that if he were elected, Ukraine would, quote, not be getting another penny, end quote, further strengthening Trump's ties to Putin. And speaking of President Trump, a judge in the president's Georgia case actually just tossed out 6 of the charges against him. Those tossed out were ones that were related to Trump pressuring public officials. This judge claimed that there was not enough evidence or the charges were not specific enough for those, instances, but Trump initially had 41 charges against him in Georgia. So even with these 6 tossed out, he still is facing 35 charges there. And that is it for our mini stories today. I wanted to obviously talk about this congressional TikTok ban. So legislation has been officially passed in the House to ban the TikTok app in the United States. Both sides of the aisle came together on this one. They want to prove that they are cracking down on China going into the election season, and this is their current method of doing so. The bill is called the Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, and what the legislation actually does is it would require that TikTok sell their app to a US-based company in order for TikTok to continue operating here in the US. It was voted in at 352 votes to 65 votes in the House. Next, it will head to the Senate. The thing is, though, this bill does face an uphill climb in the Senate, according to the New York Times, because Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has not committed to bringing the bill to a vote in the Senate. Obviously, the app has been under fire for years now, since the pandemic when lawmakers first tried to ban it. Then the state of Montana banned TikTok in their state specifically, but that ban did not hold up in court. So I wouldn't go deleting your TikTok app just yet. There's still a number of hurdles to jump through before this ban would actually go into effect. And even then, it's possible that the Chinese parent company will comply and sell the company as the bill demands, and that it will never be fully banned here in the US. We'll definitely keep you guys posted. Okay, and for the rest of the episode today, and this is long, you guys, I'm not gonna lie, I wrote a novel on this because it just, once I went down the rabbit hole, it was just so fascinating. I feel like this episode might end up being the length of like a normal bonus episode. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the unmasking of Jay Shetty. So while we have been on a celebrity conspiracy train with Kate Middleton and the Boeing suicide and all of that, I thought I would keep it going with all of the dirt that's coming out on Jay Shetty. Sometimes these days, it feels like we just build people up to watch them fall. That once somebody reaches a certain level of fame, we will inevitably find a chink in the armor and then they come tumbling down off their pedestal. So what happened to the beloved Jay Shetty specifically? Well, a searing expose came out in The Guardian entitled Uncovering the Higher Truth of Jay Shetty. The page displayed a black and white figure of Jay with cascading prayer hand emojis enveloping him as you scroll down. It opens with the detail that Jay Shetty actually officiated J-Lo and Ben's wedding in Georgia, which I didn't even know that, you guys. And it pinpointed this as almost a pinnacle of Jay Shetty's success, as they put it, a coronation of sorts, officially officiating the ultimate A-list wedding of the ages. He had also modeled for Coach. He's hosted Joe Biden, Michelle Obama, Kim Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, and did one of Kobe Bryant's final interviews before his untimely death. Jay has garnered over 15 million followers on Instagram. He has a smoothie at Erewhon named after him, for God's sake, with the likes of Hailey Bieber and Kourtney Kardashian. His is called a love potion drink for a not-so-subtle promotion of his book on love and romance. He was named in the infamous Forbes 30 Under 30. He's been on Ellen at the Red Table Talks. Will Smith took him on as a spiritual advisor. The author explains that he was perturbed when assigned to cover Jay Shetty for Esquire. He attended a show of Jay's that was cringeworthy, to put it lightly, and the author, John McDermott, was scratching his head and wondering how this man rose to the heralded position that he finds himself in. So he dove into Jay Shetty's background, and he was shocked at his own findings. But a lot of us may not even be aware of Jay Shetty's rise to fame or like his background. I know for me, I first became aware of Jay Shetty when he did his interview with Kendall Jenner, and that blew up on TikTok. To me, I was attracted to his presence. It was more about the fact that it seemed like he was really listening to her and that he cared about her mental well-being in the interview, and that he just was approaching the interview with kindness and empathy. And you just don't see that a lot with celebrity interviews. They're usually trying to get a rise out of the person or, poke certain issues. That wasn't the vibe. And I really enjoyed watching him interview her and then subsequent celebrities. But Jay Shetty became famous because he claimed to be a monk. And this is where the fault lines lay, the enormous chasms that are just too wide to stretch across. You see, Jay Shetty purported himself to be a Hindu monk for 3 years, and he wrote about it with specific dates cited in his book. He has written and spoken publicly about this many times. His book is literally entitled Think Like a Monk. And he said that he spent the majority of those years in an ashram near Mumbai, quote unquote. But it was discovered that the vast majority of this time was actually spent in London at a manor in Watford, England, giving lectures and posting to social media about his spiritual pursuits. A former girlfriend of his said he spent no longer than 2 weeks in India, to her memory, and he had never mentioned specifically where he stayed to be a monk. What town was he in? What ashram? Those things, would be pretty central to his story, no? What's also super disheartening is that renowned publications such as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, British GQ, and more have all amplified this storyline of him being a monk for 3 years without bothering to double check it. Jay said on the morning TV show in Britain, quote, "That was the hardest point in my life. I feel like I experienced depression for the first time. I had forgotten how to do small talk. I didn't know who the prime minister was. I didn't know who won the World Cup. I didn't even know how to have a conversation that wasn't deep and meaningful. End quote. Meanwhile, we found out he was blogging and traveling through Europe and attending festivals and YouTubing throughout that entire time that he was supposedly only having deep conversations and completely cut off from the world. There were also many plagiarism allegations against Jay. The man who trademarked the term urban monk had sent Jay a cease and desist for plagiarizing his content. A woman named Nicole Arbor published a video back in 2019 entitled Jay Shetty is Full of Shit, where she shows examples of him plagiarizing other creators' content. Students who had paid over $7,000 per term with Jay said that his courses had accreditations with UK schools such as universities of Chester, Buckingham, and Derby. But when John called the schools up, none of them had any kind of affiliation with Jay's school. John began to notice contradictions in the timeline of Jay's life as well. He seemed to tell the story of becoming a monk in different ways at different times. Sometimes he was 18 when he heard a monk speak for the first time and heard the call. Other times he was 22. If this was an earth-shattering moment where you decided to completely change your life entirely, move to India, go to an ashram and not talk to anybody and become a monk, wouldn't you remember when that happened? At least within a year? Pretty crazy. John, in his piece for The Guardian, also points out the innate contradictions within Jay Shetty's platform generally. He's a spiritual guide, but he doesn't tell his viewers which religion or sect or what exactly it is he practices or affiliates with. He positions himself as a mental health or romance expert with no known background in mental health or relationship counseling. From what I can tell online, he has a degree in business management, which would make a lot of sense given how he ran his spiritual efforts. He had many unpaid young people, you guys, doing his bidding within the spiritual movement, again, for free. They would pump out his content to their friends and family as a part of their spiritual quest, quote unquote, when in reality it smells a lot more like spiritual manipulation. Jay was being paid for these pieces of content per view. So telling dozens of young people that it was their spiritual duty to promote him for free is sketchy if we're being generous. Many people who previously worked for Jay have now come out likening his business practices to a cult. Women are exposing him online for attempting to profit off of their trauma and promising them that he would teach them how to make the income they had always desired through his spiritual teachings. At the end of the day, Jay Shetty is not a spiritual leader or a mental health coach. He is a content creator and a businessman. And if we were to believe the allegations against him, he's potentially a predatory one. Jay Shetty's certification school is structured very similar to an MLM, a life coaching service. He is the ultimate spiritual life coach who's sitting at the top of the pyramid, and then he recruits people below him to the school. They pay thousands of dollars to enroll to also find out how to become a life coach, and then they recruit people underneath them. We all know what this is. It's a pyramid scheme, and we all know someone or more than one person who does this type of thing for a living online. What's more, Shetty seeks out people who are struggling with their mental health already, according to allegations against him, to try and recruit. He uses the mental health angle, again, which he's not trained in, that we know of, to help him get people to open up to him, and then he uses the specifics of their struggles to try and recruit them into his training course. In the end, Esquire didn't want to turn the tables on Jay, transforming a spotlight piece into an investigation. So John took his findings to The Guardian for publishing, and that's how this piece ended up in The Guardian versus in Esquire. I must say, I was definitely disappointed to hear this news. I really enjoyed his presence. Again, I really enjoyed his interviews because they would always go deeper than the surface. I also, like I said, felt he interviewed in a really respectful way. And I wish he had just come out as a talk show host. Why did he need to be a monk or a guru or, sell life coaching courses? Like, his show on its own would have been so phenomenal just at that. But it's safe to say that Jay Shetty's life and, the way he rose to fame has been debunked, and it would be difficult to imagine him recovering from lies and allegations of this magnitude. And that for today is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with the quote, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive." And that applies to both the royal family and Jay Shetty. Age of Aquarius is in full swing, you guys. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review on that platform or a shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us to be able to keep creating the news du jour and reach more people who need a calmer space to consume the news. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfree media, and that is also linked in our show notes. You can follow us on social media at newsdujour.podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. You can follow my personal account at It's Annie Bowles on both platforms as well. Any little noises you may hear in the background are my rescue pup. He has a little separation anxiety and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma.